Hello and welcome everyone to our cross-regional webinar. We will be talking today about the professionalization of the early learning workforce, and we will be focusing on the region of Africa and the Arab region. I am so happy that we are all here, and this is really an initiative that we as regional networks, the Arab Regional Network for Early Childhood, the African Early Childhood Network, the Asia Pacific Regional Network, and International Step-by-Step Association, which is the European Regional Network, have been working closely together on this early childhood workforce. And I am so happy that we are able to share with you these insights and experiences from these two regions. To start today, we will be starting from some remarks from our regional networks, and I will start by presenting, we will go first with AfECN, and we will have Hyan Lucien, who will be sharing with us some insights. Hyan is from the Ministry of National Education and Literacy of Burkina Faso and is a co-chair at AU CSE ECED cluster for access to quality services. But before starting all of that, I just want to share some notes for everyone attending. So if you want some interpretation in French, because our presentations will be in English, you can find the interpretation button to talk in French, to listen in French in the below bar. I will also ask everyone to keep your cameras offline, and we will only have our presenters' cameras online to make sure that everyone doesn't have any issues with the bandwidth, and everyone can listen. And I will invite everyone to also introduce yourselves, where you're from, and if you want to share anything about yourself in the chat box, as well as please keep your microphones muted. The last thing I want to tell you is we will have several presentations today, so you can ask your questions in the Q&A section, and we will be monitoring all of that. We will have the Q&A session at the end of our presentations. So if you are able to put the name of who you are addressing your question to before your question, it would make it much easier to track all of that and monitor it. Thank you for being here, and Hyan, the floor is yours. Hyan, can you listen? Can you hear me? I can't hear you. Can you hear Hyan Lucien or not? Just to make sure that it's not from my side.
C'est à moi la parole?
Oui, tu peux parler maintenant.
Ok, merci Madame Boutros.
Une seconde. Mr. Hyan Lucien will be speaking in French, so if you want to switch to the interpretation so you can listen to the presentation in English, go ahead and do that now. And of course, we will be recording this, and the recording will be shared on AfECN and the ANECD websites. Monsieur Hyan, tu peux parler maintenant.
Ok, merci Madame Boutros. Alors, mesdames et messieurs, chers collègues, tout protocole respecté, je vous dis bonjour depuis le Burkina Faso. Alors, je voudrais, au nom de Monsieur Tengelaba, le président du groupe de travail sur l'accès à des services de qualité du cluster éducation et développement de la petite enfance. Vous souhaitez la bienvenue à ce web binaire, interrégional sur la professionnalisation des enseignants de la petite enfance en Afrique et dans la zone arabe. En tout cas, je voudrais remercier et saluer cette collaboration entre nos deux régions pour le développement de la petite enfance. Ceci dit, mon propos va s'articuler autour de 3 points. Je voudrais peut-être faire un rappel de l'importance du sujet qui nous réunit ce matin. Ensuite, des remerciements et enfin formuler des souhaits. Alors, comme vous le savez, je voudrais rappeler que l'éducation de la petite enfance est la fondation de tout système éducatif. Et donc, les éducateurs de la petite enfance doivent être très bien formés pour assurer la prise en charge éducative des jeunes enfants. Et je pense que si une fondation ou la fondation d'une maison n'est pas bien solide, tout l'édifice de la maison peut s'écrouler, s'effondrer. Et donc, il est nécessaire que chaque pays ait à l'esprit l'importance d'une bonne formation professionnelle des éducateurs de la petite enfance. Alors, permettez-moi aussi de remercier les collègues de l'AfECN, Dr Linette et ses collaborateurs, les bras techniques du cluster éducation et développement de la petite enfance en Afrique pour l'organisation de ce webinaire. Je voudrais aussi remercier tous les présentateurs et les modérateurs de cette session pour leur participation et puis les sacrifices qu'ils ont consentis pour préparer les exposés qui vont être présentés tout à l'heure à notre assistance. Enfin, je voudrais clore mon propos en souhaitant plein succès à notre réunion, que les discussions nous permettent d'organiser une formation professionnelle des éducateurs de la petite enfance en Afrique pour assurer une bonne éducation aux jeunes enfants pour lesquels nous travaillons. Alors, vive l'éducation de la petite enfance et je vous remercie pour votre attention.
Merci, Monsieur Lucien. We will be speaking in English. All the presentations are in English and the interpretation will be in French. I hope that, because I noticed some in the chat asking about the interpretation and the translation. So everything will be in English, the interpretation will be in French, and you can see the button for interpretation in the lower bar. Thank you, Monsieur Lucien. Now I will move to another one of our colleagues, Mrs. Mihaela Ionescu, who is the Programs Director to International Step-by-Step Association, for her to give us her opening remarks. Mihaela.
Thank you so much, Grace, and warm greetings to all colleagues that have joined the webinar today from so many countries. To this cross-regional webinar that focuses on professionalization of the early childhood education workforce. It is so inspiring to see the video that has been produced by our colleagues at the African Early Childhood Network. It's a very powerful one, and I agree with what Leslie was saying. We have to make this message crossing many country contexts and see how much it underscores how important the work we are doing as early childhood networks is, as well as the topic of the webinar today. The Early Childhood Workforce Initiative has been initiated 8 years ago, and we have done that together with colleagues from Results for Development. After 8 years, it's wonderful to see that 4 regional networks have joined this initiative, 4 networks that are sharing a commitment to prioritizing early childhood workforce across countries, and see how we can ensure that children today are the ones that are benefiting from the best conditions for their rounded and healthy development. And for that, we have learned a lot from the research, and many of the resources that have been produced already under the initiative are indicating that the workforce is the most salient factor in ensuring quality environments for children, alongside, of course, families and communities. We are thrilled to be today together with our colleagues and learn about the experience that they have had in uplifting the professionalism of those working with young children and their families. And we look forward to hear all the examples that are brought by different countries. There is much that we can learn, and I think this is one of the powers that the networks have. The information navigates easy. It's already screened in terms of quality, and it can inspire a lot of new approaches, innovations, and make us better in providing those types of narratives that are prioritizing early childhood at the country level. We bridge a lot policy, research, and practice, and I think that's also where our power lies, as well as mobilizing a lot of resources, material and non-material resources in countries across cultures and languages in understanding the importance of early years. I'm really looking very much forward to listen to all the presenters today and to learn from all the countries that will be presenting. And warm congratulations to both networks, the African Early Childhood Network and the Arab Network, in creating this opportunity for sharing and learning across regions. Thank you so much, Grace, and looking forward to the entire webinar.
Thank you, Mihaela. We were supposed to have a colleague from ANECD join us, but I cannot see Professor Vinita. Just in case I can't see the name, can you please let us know if you're here? I see someone, Siva from, okay. You can unmute yourself. Siva.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know why the video is not working, but well, I can just speak. So it's a pleasure for me to be able to speak on behalf of ANECD. It's in this particular forum, which I think is a very exciting and a very good learning forum, because it is really addressing a very important concern, with global concern, particularly in the developing countries, where
I'm switching you to panelist so you can open your camera.
Yeah. Okay. Is that better? Okay. So again, I'll start. Good afternoon to everybody. Good morning, I think, to the regions that are participating in this webinar. This is a what I was saying was that this is, I'm speaking on behalf of ANECD, which is a real pleasure for me. I think that this is a very, very important forum, because there are not many fora in which discussions are happening one on early childhood, but more than that on the early childhood workforce, because there is a general understanding which has been now substantiated by research that the teacher is the most significant element in determining the quality of early childhood education. And we also know that early childhood education can only make an impact, that is the desired impact, if there is quality. So this initiative of the Early Learning Workforce Initiative, I think, is very, very commendable from that context. This forum is very commendable because of the cross-learning efforts that have been made possible from ISSA, the African Network, Arab Network, and ANECD collaborating not only on just sharing, but also on evidence generation, advocacy, and policy engagement to address issues of early childhood workforce. So I think this is a very, very promising initiative. I will just very quickly like to share with you a few updates from what ANECD has been doing in this area. ANECD has created a regional pool of 21 master trainers covering 7 countries to support the ongoing professional development of ECC staff and focusing particularly on the critical competence gap related to socio-emotional learning. So actually ANECD has focus on socio-emotional learning, and that is very critical from the point of view of the child, because very often early childhood education gets restricted to the cognitive learning, and the socio-emotional learning and the holistic approach gets compromised. So from that extent, ANECD is making a special effort to promote and train people in socio-emotional learning. So it has also signed an MOU with Philippine Normal University to integrate socio-emotional learning into the course curriculum for pre-service teachers, and also working with BRAC to address the well-being of EC staff working in challenging contexts. Currently, we are also undertaking a mapping survey on the key issues affecting early childhood education teachers and how to integrate socio-emotional learning competencies within that frame in the Asia-Pacific region. Very recently, ANECD conducted a pre-conference workshop on socio-emotional learning to support the Early Childhood Workforce Initiative. And also a parallel session was conducted focusing on building resilience in the ECD workforce, where representatives of multiple countries working with ANECD on socio-emotional learning and the other regional networks discussed the priorities for the well-being of the EC workforce. So it's not only a question of the child's socio-emotional learning, but also the socio-emotional concerns and the well-being of the workforce that is very much to be addressed. I'm sure looking forward to this webinar, because I think this is really an opportunity to be able to participate in and share knowledge, experiences, and innovative approaches from the different regions of the world to enhance the professionalization of this workforce. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the other sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Vanita, who is from the Board of Directors of ANECD. Thank you for joining us and for your opening remarks. We will be now starting by setting the scene and understanding more the situation of the early childhood workforce. And moving forward, we will have presentations from both the region, the Africa region, and the Arab Network, or the Arab region. And I will be presenting myself. I am Grace Butros. I am the Senior Partnerships and Development Coordinator at the Arab Network for Early Childhood. I will remind you that the Q&A is open, so if you want to ask any questions, you can ask the questions in English, Arabic, or French, and kindly put the name of the presenter that you are addressing your question to, since we will be taking the questions at the end. And another reminder that this is recorded and you can have the interpretation to French in the lower bar. We will be starting by setting the scene, and I will hand it over to Professor Hasina Ibrahim, who is a research professor in the Department of Early Childhood Education in UNISA. She holds the UNESCO co-chair in early education, care, and development. Her research coheres around early childhood at the margins with special reference to policy, practice, and workforce development. In her work, Dr. Hasina contests dominant framings of early childhood and show its fragility for addressing diversity and equity. She advocates for engagement with complexity and intersectionality in unpredictable times for early childhood, and her work has earned her the status of a rated researcher in the South African National Research Foundation. She also won prestigious institutional and national awards, and she continues to be influential in the ECD field through her extensive publications and appointments on task teams as the convener of the Knowledge Generation Working Group in the Early Childhood Cluster in the African Union. We are very happy to have you here with us, Dr. Hasina, and I will hand it over to you. I will just remind all our presenters to speak a bit slower so our interpreter is able to be more accurate in the interpretation. Dr. Hasina, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Grace, for that introduction. Diran, can you please project the presentation? Thank you very much. Colleagues, today I'm going to there seems to be a black line on the presentation. It's disappearing now. Thank you very much. So it is my pleasure to present to you today the early learning workforce study that was done. And specifically, I'm going to address some insights from the landscape study in sub-Saharan Africa, where I focus specifically on the pre-primary age group that is 3 to 6 years. The work was commissioned by AfECN, and there are about 7 findings, I think, that are important to share with you. So here goes. Next slide, please. And so the background that I wanted to share with you is around projections, aspirations, and realities. So if you look at the projections for Africa, Africa is the known to be the children's continent in its projections. So by 2050, 2 in every 5 children will be born in Africa. And what that tells us is that we require some serious investment for securing the future. And the CESA 16 to 25 of the African Union does see early childhood as a critical arm for supporting future learning. And to do that, we would need sustained investment. But to reach these aspirations and to carve a developmentally appropriate pathway for our children, the realities are contesting what is possible at the moment. So we have 175 million children across the globe in the pre-primary age group that have difficulty in accessing pre-primary education. And the gross enrollment ratios are painting a bleak picture with 33%, that is 57 million pre-primary age children that don't have early learning opportunities. And so if you look at the workforce, we're looking at 90% of women that are in vulnerable circumstances that are doing ECD work. And so it's difficult for them to be motivated, engaged, and when you have these conditions of service that mitigate against the kind of work that they should be doing. So working with young children is hard work, and the stress levels are very high. Next slides, please. And so the landscape report actually helped to provide insights into the context, definitions, categorizations, approaches, and the thematic issues when it comes to developing an early learning workforce. And so the methodology, because of the time frame, a thematic literature review was used. And I'm going to hop on to the findings. So the main finding in the sub-Saharan African landscape of the workforce says this, that The early learning workforce in Africa is a broken workforce made up of a majority of women who are in dire need of systemic change. And this is from a justice slant, but social justice, gender justice, and economic and cognitive justice. So when they enter the labor force, they get a raw deal for their labor participation. And what this shows is that it is against the moral framing of human connectedness that is so dear to us in the African values. Next slide, please. And so the finding number one that I wanted to articulate is around that it's not business as usual, that the world has changed and we are now dealing with a polycrisis where you have multiple near shocks with strong interdependencies. So before you recover from one shock, the next one is in. And so you find that the early childhood workforce is dealing with a human crisis, with an increase in developmental delays, with gender inequalities, with issues of mental health and trauma, their own, the children they serve, and the families as well. Increased urbanization, a rise of digital technologies, and this really difficult kind of path to preserve indigenous knowledge and cultural child rearing practice, and the unfamiliarity of play-based learning, holistic child development, with the kind of fossilized understanding of schoolification and narrow school readiness practices. Next slide, please. And so finding two goes into, let us really understand what we are talking about in terms of early learning. Because in Africa, what the review has shown is there's a focus on just the 1 year of pre-primary education in school. And this is not the case. That we need to look at the nurturing care framework and look at the holistic nature of child development and services for children. And you can see the blue bits there, that you've got the early learning, then you've got the parent support, and then you've got organized programs that offer care and education, therefore ECCE. And in Africa, the early learning services are not just center-based. We have alternatives. We have the formal and we have the informal. And we have alternatives to school-based provision, which is in community-based sites as well as in homes. Next slide, please. And so finding three, I know it's a bit fuzzy, but this is just to tell you, when you are talking about the workforce, understand who you are talking about. So the findings show that it is a diverse workforce that occupies split systems. And those systems are in the informal early childhood care and education early learning programs, and they are within the basic general education pre-primary bits. So we have center-based early learning services, and we have different kinds of what we call the modalities or the settings. And then we have the non-center based as well. And so if we dissect it, so the analysis revealed that there are several cadres of workers that need to be taken into consideration in both those streams that characterize the landscape in Africa for the workforce. And so if you're looking at who you are prioritizing, then it is important to know whether it is the workforce that is directly related to the facilitation of early learning with children, or others with support services that contribute to the holistic development of children and their families. And so outside centers, we should also be paying attention to those that are in mobile preschools, those that offer parent support, those that are toy librarians and home visitors, amongst other kinds of facilitators. Next slide, please. And so finding 4 relates to, because we don't think of early childhood on a population level, there is a problem with supply and demand. So we have training organizations that train because they receive funding and they have a perceived notion of the demand. And because it's not fully government owned, there isn't this kind of planning that we get for schooling, for example. And from what you can see there, the representation there, that the blue bits are very little, but the green are large. So we have a long way to go towards getting additional teachers, for example, by 2030, because early childhood is not an attractive job. It has high turnover. Many leave it for other kinds of employment that are more attractive. There isn't union backing to fight for the conditions of service, for example. And then the medical aids and pensions are not forthcoming as well. Next slide, please. And so the next finding is around the underinvestment in early childhood care and education services broadly, but human resources specifically. And so here again, you can see that the reach, the blue ones are very little, but the purple ones are quite extensive in terms of what is not happening. So normally when we look at whether there is some kind of investment, we look at the GDP. And in this case, at the GDP in pre-primary compared to other levels. And so then you'll find that in reading the visuals there, you find that 0% of spending features in 6 countries in Africa. And this is quite concerning to us. Of course, there is a question of whether budgetary allocation for ECD can be linked to the GDP of a country. But the story is that we get a small share of the education budget, and this is not very promising for all the things that we want to do. And you can see the Burundi allocation at 0.2%, for example. But it's not only financial resources that are problematic to get the quality workforce going. We also have to look at political will, the weak prioritization, the leadership, the fragmentation of the governance, and the lack of continuity of project. The next slide, please. So in findings, next slide, please. The low pay and poor conditions. Now, just an overview because of time to tell you that the low pay really does not cater for the full amount of what a person needs for the living costs. And this idea of social entrepreneurship is also backfiring because it is located in poor communities that cannot afford to pay parent fees. Next slide, please. And so this one here shows the little rings and the blue bits in the end, that we are dealing with poor qualification and a dead-end career path. And most of the training is pegged at occupational and vocational sector with little involvement from the higher education sector, although there is some movement towards offering qualifications in the higher education sector. And the last slide, please. So if that is somewhat the landscape and a snapshot, next slide, please. What then would be the recommendations? The one is around the framing to make sure that we have our own resource in Africa, the Ubuntu, I, me, because of you. So morally framed action to transform the workforce. And I won't go through each of the recommendations, but it is suffice to say that we are dealing with the building of a human resource ecosystem. And this is part of the broader system of early childhood services. So your policies, your system building, your priority, your harmonization, data enhancement, the working conditions are very, very important to focus on that. And with that, thank you very much. Shukran for giving me the extra time.
Thank you, Dr. Hasina, for giving us this landscape analysis of the early learning workforce in the Africa region. I will move it now to Dr. Karine Kalustian, who is the ECD and ECCE expert, specialist, and lead researcher. Dr. Karine is a senior social and emotional learning specialist under Kitabi 3, a USAID funded education reform initiative at World Learning Beirut. She holds a PhD in child development from Purdue University. And among the various SEL activities at World Learning, Karine is currently working on the development of Lebanon's contextualized SEL measurement tools in close collaboration with the Ministry of Education and Higher Education, the Center for Educational Research and Development, and with research partners, New York University Global TIES. Dr. Karine has been in the field of early childhood education for over 15 years, working as a researcher and a consultant in both the public and private sectors in Lebanon and the region. Prior to joining World Learning, Dr. Karine taught at the Lebanese American University in Beirut for 8 years in ECE in the Department of Education. And during this time, she redesigned the Early Childhood Education MA program, revived the Early Childhood Lab School under the Department of Education with its original mission to serve as both an early child care and research center, and established research relationship between the School of Arts and Science and the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Public Health in Lebanon. Her research interests center around policies in early childhood, teacher quality of care, classroom environment, and children's social and emotional development, exploring the diverse, unique, and fragile conflict-laden context to better understand the cultural nuances that prevail in schools and how those impact children's social environment and development. Dr. Karine will be giving us a landscape analysis of the early childhood workforce status in the Arab countries. Dr. Karine, the floor is yours. And a reminder that you can ask your questions in the Q&A. We will be taking the questions at the end, so I will not be taking anyone who have any questions. If you have something to say, please put them in the chat. Sorry, Dr. Karine.
Yes, if we could just project the presentation. Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure being around all these early childhood advocates across regions. I know that we're short on time, so I'm going to do a quick overview of our session today. I think all our colleagues started the session already giving a lovely introduction to why early childhood matters, but just a recap on that. Then looking briefly on the professional development and ECD workforce in the Arab countries, and just a couple of key takeaways. Next slide, please. So just as a start, we know that the period of the early childhood period is where there's incredible brain development and is most sensitive to environmental impacts. And given today's context, children are encountering incredible amounts of stress, trauma, loss on all levels. So if the quality from early on in terms of the kind of environment that the children are exposed to is not of quality, then, and if we miss this opportunity, then there are long-term implications later on, as our colleagues earlier also mentioned, in terms of productivity, in terms of their social and emotional development, health, health challenges, mental health, and so forth. So this is a period of complete dependence that takes a long time and requires a lot of patience and skills to be able to help raise and support children develop in healthy ways. Sorry, there's a black mark on the thing, and if we can just, really sorry about that.
Yeah, let me just.
Oh, Is my voice not clear?
If you can raise your voice just a little bit.
Okay.
I think
right,
we're
so-
still seeing the black spots. Is it easy for you, Dr. Garin, to try to share it from your side?
Yeah, I could do that. But it looks fine now.
Go ahead.
Okay, and I was just also saying that basically the environment in which the child grows is extremely critical, because the early experiences affect both their lifelong health and learning, and for healthy development requires both protection and enrichment. Next slide, please. So in order to provide the child with this kind of environment where they're protected within an enriched environment for their development, we require, of course, the whole child's environment to be skilled to raise healthy children. However, in talking about the early childhood workforce, this requires a lot of capacity building, skill development for the caregivers who are caring for them. So adults need to support children to develop their skills for healthy development. And in order for this to happen, they need that kind of capacity building. And accordingly, in terms of the outcomes, the skill building, and I think one of our colleagues mentioned earlier, there is often this emphasis that especially the early years, the birth to 3 years of age, is just a time for caring for children. It's just making sure that they are okay, as opposed to teaching, learning, exposing the children into this rich environment to help develop the skills, whether it's the executive functions, the emotional development, the social development, and the like, for these children to be able to be to handle, to adapt more healthily and adapt to stress and adverse situations. So I'm sure everyone has heard the serve and return. So adults need the skills to be able to scaffold them in children. Next slide, please. In looking at the early childhood workforce in the Arab region, one of the focus areas was to look at the professional development services within the region. We are working with we are working with 6 or 7 countries within the Arab region, and we're still consolidating data. But just to give some overall findings in terms of what we did and what we have found so far from the perspective of professional development. So we know that in order for quality, you need the skilled professional workforce, and for that to happen, we need ongoing professional development for the early childhood workforce, whatever and however that is defined, which also might be is one of the points that I will make towards the end of this presentation, how we define professional development. So from the literature, it's defined as facilitated teaching and learning experiences that are transactional and are designed to support the acquisition of professional knowledge, skills, and dispositions, as well as the application of this knowledge in practice. So it's not just about attending professional development sessions and doing like 20 hours a month or a semester or a year, but rather the ongoing follow-up of how this professional development is actually impacting the teaching workforce skills, both in knowledge shift in mindset and application in practice. Next slide, please. So for this study that we've done, and it's quite preliminary in terms of findings, because as I mentioned, we're still consolidating data from the countries that are involved in the study. What we tried to do in terms of having a global picture for the region was identifying literature that exists that talks really about the early childhood, the workforce in particular, and limiting the time period from the year 2000 to present. We did get a set of documents, 130 of them for the region in particular. However, in terms of selection criteria, there were only 24 documents that met the criteria. So what we do find is that early childhood is considered important in their respective countries for the multiple reasons that have already been mentioned, which is for the social, the economic, the political, and so forth. We do also see that there is a rise in the number of working parents. The extended families are not as accessible. There is increased awareness on the importance of early childhood, and therefore there is now more increase in the number of childcare centers and childcare services to cater for this very critical age groups. Next slide, please. So we do see that it has been made a priority for a lot of the countries in terms of their SDG 2030 vision on ensuring high quality education and so forth. However, in terms of findings so far, first of all, there isn't a vast number of research that we're finding from the region that looks at impacts, if you want, on the professional development services, on the quality of the teaching workforce. So there are lots of piecemeal initiatives across the different parts of the region. There is a lot of discrepancy in terms of quality of education between the private and the public. A lot of these programs do lead to below expected standards in terms of quality, and early childhood caregivers are not seen as educators. So this also, I think, is a problem globally in terms of how the early childhood educators are seen as caregivers as opposed to educators. In fact, we're using the term early childhood caregivers right now, but there is that discrepancy there. Next slide, please. In terms of the professional development literature in the region, what we see is that professional development is oftentimes very intermittent. It's not part of a longer term vision, nor at a national scale or at center-based. I mean, it's not part of what they should be doing. So they're short-lived. Oftentimes they are not intentional nor meaningful. You have the inadequate skilled professionals, lack of needed resources, funding, and training programs for staff. I already mentioned about the discrepancies in terms of the private and the public early childcare programs, especially as it relates to the salaries, benefits, and qualifications. There is no monitoring that is happening, especially that these early childcare centers are oftentimes private under a public sector supervision. So there is not oversight. There's a lot of trauma-related caregiving challenges, especially in light of all that is happening globally. Next slide, please. And I'm on the key takeaways. Grace, I'm almost done. So we do see that while ECD, there has been a lot of advancement in terms of being part of the SDG goals. There is a lot of scarcity in terms of data for the early childcare workforce in the Arab region. There is need for deeper understanding on the causal mechanisms of what, why, and how things work. There is, in terms of the way professional development is done, there's more emphasis that needs to be paid to the content that these caregivers are being exposed to, and the format in terms of the duration, the intensity, the dose, and so on and so forth, and the cultural relevance and meaningful professional development programs that are needed for teachers. There is a lot of trauma that's being experienced by everybody in the field. So there has to be some kind of trauma-informed support and care for early childhood caregivers, which is necessary. And I think this is my last slide. Next slide, please. In terms of course, I did mention that there is scarcity in the data, but overall, if you see the types of recommendations, next steps, what's next, we constantly see the need to evaluate growth in professional development. So it's not, again, just about attending, but rather seeing where the teaching workforce is going with professional development. And we do need to create safer learning spaces for early childhood caregivers within their space to be able to have these close relationships with peers across centers, across countries, within their centers, with directors. Obviously, the policies that we always talk about, and the shift in perspective on the early childhood workforce, where the shift in perspective in terms of respecting the early childhood workforce as a start to be able to, give it its place in the field of early childhood development. So a lot more awareness in terms of the importance of early childhood across the board. I think that's it. It's always too short for too much.
Yes, that's exactly. We have a lot of amazing insights and a lot of, especially the landscape analysis and everything that's to come. Like, it's so hard to limit it to 5 or 7 or 10 minutes. But in order for us to be really able to get all these insights together, we unfortunately have to limit them to this time. Thank you, Dr. Gareen, for sharing about this. Now we will be moving to more specific case studies and more specific presentations, and we'll be starting with understanding the early childhood workforce diagnostic in the case of Gambia with Dr. David Baiza. Dr. David has over 20 years of work experience in policy, planning, implementing, and evaluating developmental programs. He previously served as an independent consultant at UNICEF Regional Office for the East and Southern Africa region, where he provided technical support in the strengthening of ECD systems in several countries, including Kenya, Mozambique, Lesotho, South Sudan, Angola, Zambia, Rwanda, Ethiopia, and Madagascar, among others. He has also served on strategic committees of the Global Partnership for Education in Washington, D.C., and managed education programs funded by and through the World Bank in Liberia, as well as worked as a consultant for UNICEF in New York. He has led a national ECE diagnostic across 12 countries, and he is the founder and lead consultant of at the Adara Research and Management Consultancy, a West African firm based in Monrovia, Liberia. Dr. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Grace, and hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I have 7 minutes, so I want to go straight into the presentation. I'm just making my screen wider so that everybody is able to see. This diagnostic specifically took place in the Gambia. So this is a specific case to just show you what the diagnostics is and the processes and steps that we went through to arrive at the conclusion in terms of the next steps, seeing that we have some glitches. So I will basically just use this approach, not to go with the main screen. So specifically, we have the essence of the diagnostics. Now, this diagnostics comes out of the global early childhood built to last conceptual framework that includes the diagnostics tool, and also was transitioned into the Early Childhood Accelerator Toolkit, the global toolkit for planning and supporting early childhood education. So the essence of the diagnostics is to support the recruitment, development, and retention of a sufficient number of pre-primary teachers. And the diagnostics has 4 goal areas. The 4 goal areas are highlighted here, where you can easily see what the goal areas are. And we move on to the objectives of the diagnostics in the Gambia. So specifically in the Gambia, the objective of the diagnostics was to analyze and document key issues affecting availability, quality, performance, and professionalization of the early learning workforce. The second key objective was to recommend legal, policy, institutional, and programmatic options that could be considered in strengthening the early childhood workforce. The methodology in the Gambia used was one, engagement with the Gambia Technical Working Group. So a technical working group was established in the Gambia. It was a country-led process specific to the situation analysis. The tools were adapted to the context of the Gambia. And there was an in-country diagnostic workshop that brought together the key stakeholders in the Gambia, including the ministry, universities, agencies, as well as decentralized institutions around identification and validation of challenges related to availability, quality, performance, and professionalization of the ECE workforce. The second key aspect was the identification and validation of the policy, institutional, and programmatic options. At the end of the day, we had a comprehensive report and also developed a policy brief. Specifically, what were the key issues identified specific to the different goal areas? So goal 1 has to do with establish a strategy for recruiting ECE staff based on clearly defined staff qualification requirements and competency profiles. So what we found out in the Gambia was 1, that there is this inadequate recruitment and deployment strategy for the ECE workforce. There's insufficient number of ECE personnel to address the demand. Profile and competencies are inadequate and do not cover other ECE personnel. Limited performance management systems to address pay and job progression. These were specific to goal 1. For goal 2, we identify limited pre-service systems and alternative pathways. There's no degree program, and existing programs are only provided in 2 physical locations. The existing pre-service program has gaps in content around family support and emergencies. There's no evidence around existing pre-service program effectiveness and efficiency. There's also limited personnel capacity to advance the ECE pre-service programs to higher levels. Finally, specific to goal 2, there are limited personnel capacity to advance ECE pre-service programs to higher level. Goal 3, there is the absence of a continuous professional development program for the ECE personnel, including the non-teaching staff. There exists weak institutional capacity to deliver CPD programs by the recognized institutions. There are recognized institutions for CPDs, but those institutions don't have the capacity to deliver the program specific to pre-primary. There's no institutionalized system to facilitate reflection, discussion, and preparation for teaching at the school level. And finally, for goal 4, which specifically focuses on promoting continuous workforce improvement and staff retention, we found out that there's inadequate career development pathway to attract and retain ECE personnel. So there seems to be a very limited attraction system for more personnel. There's also the absence of a national framework for performance-based promotion and limited career development progression. Now, this specific findings correlate with other findings we've seen across other regions where mostly ECE personnel are most likely not on the government's payroll. There's also inadequate policies and practices to support conducive working environment. Teachers' assessment systems are not applicable to ECE. There are assessment systems for other subsectors, primary, junior secondary, and secondary, but specific to ECE, there's none. There's absence of training for school heads, supervisors, care providers, and other ECE personnel. There's also absence of a national strategy for curriculum implementation, and there's limited financing for curriculum implementation. Considering all of these findings, the country gathered all the stakeholders together to find ways in which they could mitigate these gaps, strengthen the system, and provide better services. So these are the overall strategies identified by the country to address those specific issues. One is to strengthen existing policies to address the workforce deployment gaps, to strengthen capacity to scale existing programs, strengthen existing policies around CPD, establish policy guidelines defining career development pathway, enhance institutional capacity, constitute a career development pathway, and ensure funding for CPD initiatives across all regions of the countries. So you can see clearly the diagnostics one provides an opportunity for stakeholder engagement, inclusive participation, discussions, but also a situation analysis. The challenges are identified, but not limited to the challenges. The strategy to mitigate these challenges are also identified, which culminates into a work plan for the country to address the specific issues of ECE workforce. Thank you.
Thank you, David. This has really been insightful, and we have a lot of comments saying that. I will remind everyone attending that you can ask questions in the Q&A section, and we will be taking them at the end. Now we will be moving to understanding and looking at a case from the Aga Khan about the innovative practices in teacher development. And we have Dr. Anil Khamis, who is the senior advisor to the provost and research professor at the Aga Khan University and University College London Institute for Education. Dr. Khamis has a wide experience in policy and governance, strategic thinking and program development, intersectoral approaches, and monitoring and evaluation, particularly with disfranchised communities in sub-Saharan Africa, South and Central Asia, and the Middle East, having worked in some 30 countries over the last 2 decades. He has over 100 publications in international peer-reviewed journals, reports, and book chapters. Dr. Khamis is a senior advisor to the provost at Aga Khan University with the research professor cross-entity appointments in the Institute of Educational Development, the Institute for Global Health and Development, and the Institute for Human Development. He is also a senior academic with the University College at London, previously the University of London, and he works regularly with international and bilateral agencies, research institutes, and international NGOs with particular expertise in the area of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. He spends most of his time in Kenya and travels widely for his work. Dr. Khamis, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Grace. Please confirm you can hear me well.
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
And also, Grace, if my connectivity does end, then please continue with the slides and I'll join with my mobile data. First of all, Karibu, Kenya, Marhaba, colleagues, Ahlan wa Sahlan. It's an absolute pleasure. I want to thank the previous speakers for really giving us a very clear overview. I'll get right into our perspective from East Africa, particularly Kenya. So we have the 3 challenges that have been mentioned already. Children, who are not reached and whose development potential is compromised, and services not being invested, and that policymakers and other actors are somewhat disengaged and not really aware of the critical importance of early childhood development. So in terms of capacity gaps, we've done some mapping. We've looked at Eastern and Southern African countries. We're also partly in the Middle East, Central Asia, and Pakistan. We consider the individual, we consider the organizational, and we create the systemic aspects. I won't go into all of this clearly because it's been covered earlier. In terms of recommendations that emanate from the mapping studies that we have done, At the individual level, we really need to be able to share technical resources using multiple platforms. I'm going to highlight that for now. With that, we really need the follow-up. We know that one-off trainings are not very useful, and it's important that we have a follow-up. The institutional level, we need to prioritize inclusivity. We know that children with disability, for example, or children who are hard to reach, are left behind in current programming. And we also know from good educational pedagogy that when you have multiple abilities together, learning of all improves significantly. And at the systemic level, Dr. Hasina has already mentioned this, that we really need multi-sectoral coordination. And we believe the nurturing care framework is very, very important and critical. We established the Early Childhood Development Workforce Hub in 2021, but there's a lot of work that goes back all the way to the founding of the Institute for Human Development at the Aga Khan University, well over 10 years. And it's supposed to be a virtual platform or network linking all the various countries we have a presence in. And we have really contributed to government integrated ECD policies, research, capacity building, etc. So in terms of the workforce hub itself, there are three critical objectives. One is access, particularly for the most marginalized. And we work particularly in the northern areas of Kenya, which comprises 65% of the landmass, known as arid and semi-arid lands. So these are areas that have got desertification, pastoralist nomadic communities, and animal husbandry. In terms of knowledge, we create resources and that we then build that into competencies. And where we can, we link that to the general curricula, such as the competency-based curriculum that is ongoing in Kenya right now. And then we translate evidence into low-income settings. We're particularly working in Turkana, Garissa, Isiolo, Mandera, and Marsabit. In the devolution of the current work in Kenya, counties have a lot of power and decision-making in terms of priority setting. So this is our knowledge into action profile with technical advisory committees and services at every level to ensure that we get rid of bottlenecks wherever we can. Of course, we build on the science of early childhood development, and we've created additional courses on inclusivity, children with disabilities, gender, etc. These data are slightly outdated. We really now have expanded to something like 15 countries. So we have influence, according to our bibliometric analyses, something in the order of 70 policy documents. We've reached universities, university academics. We're trying to have a multiplier effect. At our sister institution at the Institute for Educational Development, both in Tanzania, which serves the East African region, as well as Pakistan, that serves the Asia region, including the Middle East. We've got advanced certificate, degree, and postgraduate degree programs in early childhood development as an integrated approach rather than education per se. And we are funded, of course, by very generous people, and without whom none of this work would be done. And we have interdisciplinary teams that cover psychometrics, et cetera, et cetera. So with that, I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Anil. These are really insightful things. And as someone pointed out in the chat, yes, the regions do face a lot of similar challenges, even though these challenges are different from context to context. And I might point out also to a landscape analysis that ESA has done and is available on the Early Childhood Workforce Initiative website, saying what are the major challenges that the early childhood workforce faces and how we can address them and what are the specific needs. So I will invite you to go check it out on the Early Childhood Workforce Initiative website. And on that note, we will now move to the Arab region, where we will be talking about the working conditions of the early learning workforce during crisis and war in Palestine with Dr. Mohammed Matar. Dr. Mohammed Matar is the Director General at the Center of Educational Research and Development in the Ministry of Education in Palestine. He has over 20 years of experience in topics related to educational evaluation, policy-oriented research, management of educational development programs, monitoring and evaluation, learning assessment, and capacity building assessments. Dr. Matar, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Grace. And I will shift to the audio because of the connectivity. Pardon me. So, good morning, good evening, everybody from Palestine. And it will be like my honor to be with you and to present something about the case of the early learning workforce in our country, our occupied country, really. And pardon me if you can see some pictures that are really not that ones that we hope to see for kids and our small ones in the world. But anyway, we are under occupation, and this is the case. Next, please. So again, I will present some statistics about the workforce in the ECD sector in Palestine, and then some challenges, and then go to some research findings based on what we are doing within the Arab network about the early learning workforce in Palestine. Just to note that Palestine community is a young group, like 40% of our population is between 0 and 14 age. So we are talking about if we are working with this group age or age group, we are working with more than 40% of the population. We have about 2,200 kgs in Palestine, like 1,500 in West Bank and 600 in Gaza, and we have about 300 nurseries. This is the formal statistics, but we have not registered, institutions that's still there. About the workforce, we have like about 7,800 or 900 teachers working in the KGs in Palestine, about 5,000 in West Bank, and about 2,800 in Gaza. And we are just registered about 1,240 caregivers working in nurseries in the country. And we have about 170,000 kids in KGs, divided like 100,000 in West Bank and about 68,000 in Gaza. And we have still the kids in nurseries are still not not accurate numbers. So I prefer not to present the numbers there, because we have home-based nurseries working, and there is no data or no statistics about this group. Next, please. Next, please. Okay, education under attack. I will present, like this poster. This poster is prepared monthly by the Ministry of Education and Higher Education in Palestine, and this, this poster is showing like a very catastrophic situation, like having more than 400 schools, 400 educational staff killed in Gaza Strip, and about 2,000 injured there. So you are talking about a catastrophe out of there. We have a total or like complete damage for KGs, schools, universities in Gaza after the war. And in West Bank the situation is not that good, because eventually you will find some attacks from the Israeli occupation and Israeli settlers inside the villages and cities, and they are all the time tackling or attacking schools, students going to their schools or KGs. So these statistics show that we have a very dangerous situation facing our educational system, not only KGs and nurseries, but also schools and universities. Next, please. In Gaza, because I will focus more in Gaza, because the situation now after 300 days of war, genocide were really there. Yani you will find something impossible. About 40,000 Palestinians killed there. Maybe 70% of them are small kids and women and innocent people. And we have like 2 million internally displaced. Like 90% of Gaza people, part of this population are workforce working with small ones in KGs, nurseries, and the schools. And we have like more than 1,000, about 1,000 people, 100,000 people injured. And when talking about injuries, yani there is no hospitals, there is no medical places to have such injuries. So they are, and you see this photo in the left of the slide. This is in 13 of this month when the Israeli shelling Khan Yunis, trying to assassinate a leader there, and they killed 120 persons. Palestinians, maybe 80 of them are small ones and women. This is the case, and this is affected really the workforce, not only in KGs and nurseries, but also all working in the next, please. What early learning workforce needs during crisis in Palestine. I'm talking about community needs, because those workforce are part of the community. We have like 100,000 households estimated to be in urgent need for shelter support. All schools there, the remaining schools, are now used as shelters for people. For food security, we have 100%. All population, where analyzed population is projected towards level of food insecurity. This is the case of food security. Next, please. For protection, we know that for protection, like 1 million children in need of mental health. And thanks for some international agencies and national firms that are working there under such dangerous conditions. We have like more than 17,000 children are unaccompanied for separated. They are lost, no families for them. For the health, we have like about 36 hospitals in Gaza. 21 of them are out of service. This is general case that you can say about health situation there. Next, please. For the nutrition, again, no food there, unfortunately, and more than 50,000 children, I'm talking about children, are estimated to require a treatment for accurate malnutrition in 2024. This is the statistics from the UN agencies. And water and sanitation, more than 340,000 tons of accumulated solid waste are now there in the land, and they are really doing something for the innocent people there, how to deal with such amount of remaining solid waste. Next, please. For educational needs, which is our story, I think that what we need, or what they need as working force, they need access to education. There are no access to education since 300 days. Safe educational buildings, and it is not safe really. Educational facilities, thanks again for the UN agencies and for some donors and some Arab countries and international communities that are providing some facilities there. They need training, but it is not accessible, and unfortunately there is no salaries. The banks are not working well there. So it is a complicated situation there for not only for the educational stuff in Gaza at this time. Please, next. I will for the time, I will note some research work for the Arab network within the SRM, strategic research model. Unfortunately, we have 5 strategic models. One of them, the second one, is titled "The Working Conditions of Education in Nurseries and Kindergarten in 7 Arab Countries." Fortunately, also that Palestine was one of these countries, and okay. Palestine was over the country, and I was the researcher in this SRM. And we have literature review, and we collect data from workforces about their working condition. And the tools are now ready, and and we can use such tools not only in the Arab countries but in other countries in the world. Next, please. Some key challenges from this SRM model that we have, the work in this KGs and nurseries are not attractive because of the wages and salaries. There is no sufficient legal documents and the frameworks that manage the workers there. Next, please. Some needs: assistant staff, wages, incentives, training programs, contracts and job descriptions, clear ones, platforms for complaints, because when they are working in some private institution, the data are not available there. Next, please. Last but not least, the model is, provide some suggestions like linking this sector or this issue with commitments for SDGs and Transforming Education Summit, because all Arab countries, and Palestine is one of these countries, are committed with these international, events. Database is needed because really we are suffering from absence of databases there. And some adoptive effective mechanism to deal with unlicensed nurseries and KGs, and it is a phenomena in our country. Next, please.
Dr.
Yes, please. I did finish. These are some links, that help having more information about this issue in Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Matar. And I will, since you were talking about the strategic research model, talking about the working conditions of the early childhood workforce in the region, I will ask Muhammad to share the link for the report and the brief that is available on the Arab Network's website in the chat, so you can go and read more about this.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving us this example, because it really shows how, when we're talking about early childhood or the workforce or the learning conditions, we can't only talk about the teachers or the children themselves, but we really need to look at the holistic situation they are in, because the entire infrastructure and situation reflects on how we can support them and how we can better do this. We will now be moving to Jordan and talking about the initiatives of the Jordanian National Early Childhood Development Team in supporting the early learning workforce. Our presenter is Tamara Al-Zabi, who is the lead childhood specialist at the National Council for Family Affairs and the coordinator of Early Childhood Development National Team. With a career spanning since 2009, Tamara has extensive experience in the field of early childhood development. As a trainer on ECD issues, she has specialized training in working with young children and the AfECN program, enhancing her expertise and effectiveness in early childhood education. She holds a bachelor degree in management information systems, blending her technical expertise with her passion for childhood development to make a meaningful impact in her work. Tamara, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Grace. Hello, everyone. Did you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, Grace, for giving us these opportunities. I want to tell you first about my organization, the National Council for Family Affairs. The National Council for Family Affairs, NCFA, was founded in 2001 as an umbrella organization that supports institutions working in the family field. The NCFA, presided by Her Majesty Queen Rania Al Abdullah, and managed by a board of trustees consisting of a number of line ministries, governmental and non-governmental institutions, and agencies that are concerned with family affairs. NCFA is mandated work as an umbrella organization and as a coordinating body for relevant governmental and non-governmental agencies in the field of human and social development and family issues. The Council is actively involved in building constructive relationship with all relevant actors in order to ensure a better quality of life for Jordanian families. The Board of Trustees is a think tank that aims to reinforce the status of the Jordanian family through its main role in developing the policies, legislation in a participatory approach that combines government, institution, and civil society institution, quality of life for Jordanian families. In 2009, National Council for Family Affairs held a consultative meeting with the stakeholders on ANECD in Jordan, announcing the official launch of the NCFA's formation of the National Team for Early Childhood Development that aimed to bringing all together all the key players to foster a better intersector collaboration dedicated to troubleshooting ECD-related issues. Most participating organizations and institutions appeared very supportive and welcomed the idea to establishing the national ECD team, as well as having a database available with the information and the program run by each partner, as this could help on working in cross-cutting issues and better coordination. The team vision and mission is to networking and coordinating among all the early childhood actors in Jordan to ensure the integrated and synergic efforts and integration to gain support for early childhood issues and to ensure the best investment of resources to achieve the goals within a common wide national vision. The team is chaired by the Secretary General of the NCFA. We have a coordinator from NCFA also that are, the task of this coordinator is to prepare the agenda, to provide members with the documents of the meeting, record the meeting, and send them any decision that are making in the team. The membership of the member team is 2 years and it's renewable. On the other side, NCFA works to in support and activation of the establishment of institutional nurseries in the public and the private sectors. The project work to establish about 70 nurseries. This establishment has created about 700 opportunities for girls job opportunities for the girls to work in these nurseries. Also, we have in the second phase, we are in collaboration with WISC University. We have worked on the nursery childcare provider curriculum that are developed in 2020. This curriculum is comprising 5 training modules. These training topics related to children with disabilities, developmental delays, early detection, child protection from violence and abuse, psychological and social support for caregivers in nurseries. Also, we have implemented the first national project in Jordan to support to establish 20 home-based nurseries in 3 governorates. The goal is to expand nursery and facilities and provide job opportunities for female providers, female graduates from the Vocational Training Corporation. Also, NCFA was prepared the first equality system for nurseries that aim to enhance and develop the quality level of services that are provided to children in nurseries. The system comprises 7 key areas: management and organization, learning environment, basic care, program and activities, assessment, nutrition and healthcare, positive interaction and collaborative relationship with families and the community. NCFA also approved the professional standard for the child care institute providers. These standards aim to establish a national benchmark for regulating the outcomes of practical and training programs. Also, a question bank for the child care provider certification exam has been prepared and endorsed. with the Technical and Vocational Skills Development Commission. This certification aims to facilitate access for women, caregivers, and workers in the nursery sector to obtain the child care provider certification. It also offers a comprehensive collection of over 600 specialized electronic questions related to early childhood and child care in nursery. That's it. Thank you, Grace. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Tamara, for your presentation. I will remind everyone that you can ask the questions at the Q&A box, or you can also put them in the chat box. And we are heading into our last presentation for today, concerning Nawara, which means actually, Reem will tell you. Nawara website initiative, the mental health and psychosocial support for early childhood professionals and frontliners. And we have Reem Fawaz from the Arab Resource Collective, who will be sharing this with us. Reem is a licensed psychologist and mental health professional. She is currently pursuing a PhD in psychology at the Lebanese University, specializing in clinical adjustment and personality psychology. Reem serves as the MHPSS coordinator at the Arab Resource Collective, or ARC, where she leads and manages the project activities. Additionally, she is a lecturer at the Jinan University teaching psychology courses. Reem, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Grace. Hello, everyone. As Grace mentioned, we will be talking about the mental health and psychosocial support program at ARC, the Arab Resource Collective, and the Arab Network for Early Childhood Development, ANECD. The Mental Health and Psychosocial Support Program was developed by the Arab Resource Collective and the Arab Network for Early Childhood Development to address the need for knowledge and rights-based Arabic resource on mental health. Recognizing the significant gap in accessible and reliable information, ARC and ANECD created the Nawara MHPSS website. Nawara, which means shining through the darkness and blossoming flowers in Arabic, its purpose is to support professionals, frontliners, caregivers, and anyone interested in mental health and looking for a credible and a valid Arabic MHPSS resource, support groups, and toolkits. Nawara aims to be a beacon of hope and a source of blossoming growth for those navigating the challenges of mental health, especially the ECD frontliners. Our vision, both in the website and in the MHPSS program, is a world where Arabic-speaking communities have good mental health and well-being and are able to seek help in a safe and supportive space. Our mission is to increase community awareness about mental health topics and provide psychosocial support through online interventions. Our values, four of our values are a lot more than that, is to have mental health that is, it's not a privilege, it's a right, and everyone who's suffering from mental health issues has the right to address these mental health issues and seek for help. Mental health is an inseparable part of the holistic health and public health. Mental health struggles are normal and nothing to be ashamed of. Individual mental health contributes to the growth and betterment of the community. Our objectives are to enhance frontliners' knowledge of mental health topics and empower them to take care of their mental health and well-being, in addition to enhancing frontliners' emotional and coping skills to reduce the stress related to their demanding work, which will help the frontliners and increase their ability to provide nurturing environments for children. And this will also affect the mental health of the children and their well-being and development. Also, one of our objectives is to increase the levels of job performance and job satisfaction among ECD frontliners. The main components of Nawara website are the MHPSS toolkit, support groups, and resources. And there is a page for opportunities. The MHPSS toolkit is a self-paced curriculum where participants can take and participate on their own time. It consists of 10 mental health and psychosocial support sessions that targets ECD frontliners. It consists of a lot of topics, including mental health, general mental health, and resilience and burnout session, how to create the harmony between personal life and work life, in addition to how to increase the psychological immunity and the self-efficacy of the participants. The sessions are they are techniques that the frontliners can take and can learn online these techniques to help stress relief and gain coping skills with all the stressors, especially in crises in the Arab world. In addition, there will be a moderator that will make sure that the frontliners mastered these techniques. And if there is any question, a moderator will be answering these questions. In addition to the support groups offer the members the opportunity to connect, share, support, and seek support from other professionals. It's like they will be discussing specific topics in mental health and psychosocial support to support each other and to discuss their problems with each others. While the resource page is a library on mental health and psychosocial support topics, it consists of books, booklets, articles, reports, toolkits, brochures, infographics, anything that is related to mental health, and anyone can enter and download or upload a resource that serves as an information for the frontliners or anyone interested in mental health. And the opportunity page, I did not mention it in the presentation. It's a page that will offer job opportunities in addition to building capacities, opportunities for anyone who can enter, see what's new in the field, where there is trainings, workshops, webinars that they can attend, and to register through the website. This is the main concept of Nawara and the mental health psychosocial support. Its main purpose to support the ECD frontliners and help them gain or increase their knowledge in mental health and gain the techniques they need in order to help self-help and in order to decrease the stressors they are living. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reem, for this presentation, and thank you for all the panelists. Now I will open the floor for your questions. We already have a couple of questions, so I will invite everyone to, again, share your questions in the Q&A. I will first address, one of the questions that we do have is, I will address it to everyone, and please, any of the panelists, feel free to unmute yourself and open your camera to answer this. But we do have a question about where are we today on the generalization of education and the early childhood. We also have another question about the financial investment in early childhood education from, excuse me if I'm pronouncing the name wrong, Monji. If you want to unmute yourself and ask your questions. I will also remind you that this is going to be recorded and we will share it on our website. And if we have consent from our presenters, we will try to add the presentations there as well. Now, anyone from the panelists, you can unmute and answer the question about where are we today in the generalization of education in early childhood? And do we know anything about, because definitely we need a lot of data. I'm not sure it's readily available, but about the financial investment in early childhood education. Dr. Muhammad, go ahead.
Thank you. I think I'm talking about the Arab region, about the generalization of ECD education. I think we have not heavy news about that, based on the percentage of access to this sector in terms of KGs and nurseries. So, like in Palestine, we have about 55 access or enrollment, and fortunately, the Arab network is conducting a research about enrollment in KGs in Arab countries, about 5 Arab countries, with the regional UNESCO office in Riyadh, and the data is there. This was conducted 2018, I think. So the access rate or the enrollment rate is not supportive one in the Arab region, and we can also find some information about that in the UIS data. This is about, the access or the enrollment. The other issue about financial issues, and we fortunately also part of the SDG 4 mentioning something about financial issues, and TIS, Transforming Education Summit, also raised this issue there. So we are now trying within the Arab countries and the Islamic countries to try producing something about financing ECD sector. I think there is no clear, data except the ones that are produced by the ministries in the Arab countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Matar. And I think one of our goals as this early childhood workforce initiative, and since the 4 regional networks are joining efforts to work on this, is to really create evidence and push for policies. So the early childhood education and the early childhood workforce are prioritized when it comes to financial investments and new policies or even their own specific, because sometimes these are overlooked. And I can share, from example, in the Arab region, we do have the private sector and the public sector separated with different ministries, and there is no alignment in these minimum standards. So there's a lot of things that needs to be addressed, and we hope as this ECW initiative to work together to change the status globally. We do have another question from, again, apologies if I'm pronouncing the name wrong, Demiki. And your question honestly deserves a webinar and a workshop on its own concerning how we can really use the evidence to contextualize the curriculums and the sessions. I see that you addressed the question to Dr. Khamis, and he answered in the chat, but I will invite you, Dr. Khamis, to share your answer live right now, because it's very insightful and it's a very important issue.
Thank you, Grace and Demeke. Yes, I think these are very, very critical questions. That what do we mean by play? Where does play actually take place? Is it the role of schools? Schools are very overburdened. Cultural considerations means that we have, if you like, an implicit cultural colonialism, if I can call it that, in the general narrative of playing to learn, learning to play, all of that. But we actually know the critical importance of play generally, which builds collaborative relationships amongst children, allows cooperative approaches, considers problem solving as a direct effect of cognitive and developmental outcomes. We have a very strong program here in East Africa that is 40 years old, called the Madrasa Resource Center or the Madrasa Early Childhood Program. It was linked and specific to East African Muslim communities, which at one point were the most disadvantaged in the Eastern African context. And so low-cost materials, play materials, linking that to cognition, development, bringing local traditions together, oral cultures. All of that has been done, documented, researched, and I think it's a very, very important question. One of our great intellectuals in East Africa is somebody called Ali Mazrui, who said that play has displaced things like hunting and fishing and initiation ceremonies, which take place all over our context. So I think it's a question of what Dr. Hassan mentioned earlier, Hasina Ibrahim mentioned earlier, and that is around the question about what do we mean by indigenous knowledge? How do intergenerational populations, multi-generational populations in robust kinship structures work together? And I've just come back from Amman, Jordan, not too long ago. And people were saying that our traditional culture of being hospitable and humanitarian has really been affected by decades of conflict. So I think this is a very critical question, Demeke, because we are challenging centuries-long traditions that have worked for our cultures and our traditions. Thank you, Grace. Over.
Thank you, Dr. Khamis. Yeah, that's definitely one of the issues that really need to be addressed. And on that, one other issue that needs to be addressed, and there's a question about that, is that even if we do reach and we have powerful policies, sometimes these policies are on paper, and later on they're not like implemented or they're not followed up with. So we do have a question, and I invite if we have someone from the African network who can answer this. If so ECD policies and its implementation is finalized without actual engagements, is there a way that the Early Childhood Workforce Initiative or the African Network is able to do research for ECD in these various provinces? The person asking is saying that there is no office that wants to take full responsibility to enable proper inclusivity and educational participation for success. David, you want to answer?
Yes, I think on that point, that's something we've seen across many countries. And just to just piggyback on the previous speaker, there's also the issue with curriculum before we even come to implementation across East and Southern Africa, that majority of the countries, early childhood development or early childhood education curriculums are more like 10 years older, which call for immediate action around revision. We did a whole study last year to just understand those intricacies. Number two, even with those curriculums outliving their period of validity, there's also the indication of the language of instruction, which for most early childhood systems are local languages, but those curriculums are not translated into local languages. They are still in English or the official quote unquote language. And as a result of that, teachers at schools and centers who are assigned to be teachers of those curriculum don't even speak the local language that they should be teaching in, which create barrier for implementation. So curriculum is a policy, like other policies. There has to be, number one, for implementation, there has to be, number one, clear government leadership. There needs to be an agency with the leadership responsibility for implementation. And within that ministry or that agency, there has to be a bureau, a directorate, or a department that is directly responsible. We've seen that in different countries. So for example, in Liberia, we have an assistant minister for early childhood development. In South Sudan, we see the director general position that should be in place, but not fully in place yet. In the Zambia, I see Director Cham on the webinar here. So there has to be government leadership. Number two, there has to be strategic partnership with the stakeholders within the sector around policy implementation. Policy implementation cut across all subsectors within education and child welfare, not just early childhood. So it's a system issue that needs to be addressed broadly and specifically to early childhood development. We need leadership, we need the right policies, we need contextualized policies, not just the right, but contextualized policies that speaks to the reality of the issues. Some policies are not implemented because they are not contextualized. They are overambitious and they cannot fit within the context in which they exist. So these are some of the challenges related to policies not being implemented. Once there's no government leadership, policies will never be implemented.
Thank you, David. We have Dr. Hasina, do you want to answer, like follow up on this question so that I don't move to another question?
Yes, thank you very much. I think in the policy front, one of the things that is coming to the fray is a participatory action learning in terms of bringing the critical voices together in the stakeholder community. And one such example is a South African example of the intersectoral forum, where you have multiple stakeholders coming together, sharing information, working with government and cross-fertilization of ideas in order to have policy building. But the problem still remains how much the top is willing to listen to the bottom, given the cost-effective kind of notions and the debt burdens that we have. So the solutions are there and they are felt needs and realities, but the problem is the take-up. And then the other problem with policy is that we catapult to a very sophisticated level of a policy, and when we have global frameworks and what have you, and there's a bit of money attached to it, and you think that our countries are then very well placed to take this up and run away with it. But actually, we are at maybe before an entry point of addressing a particular issue with regard to, for example, the professionalization of the workforce and their conditions of service. So a phased approach is taken, or something that comes from an international push is taken. A good example is the way 1 year of preschool has been tagged onto basic education for universal access. And the problems there has been enormous. It has taken us like about 22 years before we can get things running. That is because of the complexity of the context that is not fully engaged with, but rather looked at whether we are compliant to what is coming from the top. And I think that is something that needs to be engaged with. How ready are we contextually, and how responsive can we be with regard to whatever is called for? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hasina. I will take one last question since we are way over time. Espoir, you can unmute yourself and talk if you have one quick question before we move to our closing remarks.
Thank you so much. My name is Espoir. My question was just about the inclusiveness of these children that have disabilities. Sometimes we exclude them. Sometimes when we talk about ECD, when we talk about how to create some toys for the ECD for the children, but sometimes we find ourselves that we are leaving behind these children that has disabilities. So I was just kind of reflecting how supportive can we to give those children the rights. Another thing is about the capacity of the ECD caregivers or teachers on how they can treat those children with special needs. So if anyone has any any step that have done before or any success to those kind of challenges might just share some tips points. Thank you.
Thank you, Espoir. And I do also think that this does deserve its own webinar. I'm not sure if any of our panelists can answer in just 1 minute. Or you can also, our panelists or anyone else from ESA, ARNEC, AfECN, or ANECD can share some links in the chat. But this is definitely the inclusivity and the capacities of the workforce to accommodate and work with children who have additional needs or special needs is definitely on one of the topics that needs to be highlighted. Does anyone from Dr. Matar, if you can answer briefly, please?
Briefly, I think inclusive education is an issue now, and it was raised within the SDGs, Grace, and within the TESS, the Transforming Education Summit, and there's a lot of documents there, mainly in Tashkent, summit there. It was introduced there, but again, I may raise one issue for further discussion, not now, about how to use, IT and those technologies in having such inclusive paradigm or inclusive approach. IT technologies are important in this domain, and we can think together late, not now, in another issue, and we maybe open some chats about that, how to maximize the benefit from IT in having such inclusive approach within ECD sector. Many thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Matar. I will now hand it to Given for our closing remarks. Thank you all. Given.
Thank you, Grace. I think it was a very interesting discussion. So my task right now is just to sort of give some concluding remarks, and then we can wrap up the webinar. So I just have a few comments to make in my closing remarks. You will agree that this webinar has provided all of us an opportunity for us to engage, knowledge share, and learn from our experience, and also from some of the good practice in workforce related issues, experiences drawn from the Arab and Africa regions. We have heard from the presentations that there is much to be done to enhance the status, attractiveness, and professionalization of this particular workforce, which is in dire need of systemic change. One of the statements that sort of rang loud in my ear was the whole issue around the need to build an HR ecosystem. So we need to begin to look at having a more systemic approach in addressing the issues of the workforce, particularly because this is a workforce that faces multiple issues, which needs a comprehensive response. From the webinar discussion and presentation, I think it's also clear that we are looking at building of a workforce that is resilient, that is versatile, and that is multi-skilled, because this is a workforce that is working in a context, an evolving context, and a context where they are which faces a number of shocks and challenges. We know of the COVID-19s and the wars that have been discussed here, the issues of food insecurity, climate change. And we also know that this is a workforce that is working with children who require a comprehensive package of support. So we're looking at a workforce that is resilient, that is versatile, and that is multi-skilled. The other issue that sort of stands out for me is the whole issue around the underinvestment in the early childhood education sector. I think this has been highlighted, and this requires our continued advocacy. And also we need, as we advocate, there is also need to ensure that human resources is part of the investment plans. I think we need to begin to look at the issues around the workforce within the national sector or national plans and programs as a key component of those sector plans. I think the webinar also provided us with some perspectives of some of the tools that are available that can be used and which could help in workforce planning. We've heard of the diagnostic approach, the diagnostic tools that have been used. And I think these kind of tools also help us, would help countries to ensure that there is a sound, evidence-based foundation for the development of human resource strategies. And then finally, I just want to also make a comment on the importance of partnership and collaboration. Due to the multi-faceted issue which surrounds the workforce, there has to be collaboration across sectors in addressing those issues. And one of the Early Childhood Workforce Initiative has also already been mentioned in this webinar, but I would also just like to highlight this as an initiative that involves the 4 regional networks that also enhances collaboration across regions. And we're happy also to have had this webinar undertaken in the framework of this Early Childhood Workforce Initiative. So what remains to be done now is really for me to thank all the keynote presenters, to thank the panelists, our moderator, and all of you who have been part of this webinar. So we thank you, and we look forward to further collaboration with you. Thank you, and we can end the webinar here. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All the best.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye. Bye. Bye.